Sunday at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, round 2. Trump and Hillary getting ready to go at it once again.
This morning, political analysts Wendy, Patrick, and Laura Fink join us with more. Ladies, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So this is a little bit different setting. The debate's going to be a town hall. Half of the questions they're going to be asked by audience members. The other half will be asked by the moderators like we've been seeing in the past. Who do you think this format favors? Laura, you can start.
Well, I think that both candidates really have to take a look at the context in which they're stepping onto that debate stage, and that will drive how they approach it. Right now, Donald Trump needs a game changer because he's down by double digits in Pennsylvania, in Colorado, by at least 6 in Florida, and even Ohio. Hillary, the latest polls show her up by 4, which means he can't afford to tread water. So he needs to have a command performance on Sunday night. Hillary also needs to connect and keep her momentum going. So her job is a little bit less difficult. Now, it's difficult to say who would benefit from this format because I do think that generally speaking, Donald Trump likes less structure, which this is, you're not behind a podium. It's a little bit less structured, but it also offers opportunities for him to go off script, perhaps a little too much. Hillary might benefit a little bit more from judging her performance from the commander-in-chief hall, from connecting a little bit more with the audience, from showing a little bit more empathy, and that will enable her to increase her favorables with the audience at home.
That's pretty good advice for the candidates right there. Wendy, what would you, I mean, it is. What would you tell them?
Let me add some things that are a little bit new. Okay, one of the things that we're hearing about is, it's true that Donald Trump benefits from a town hall forum structure. He doesn't benefit from the very formal first debate kind of format. Hillary does. She's been doing it for years. You remember, if anybody doubts her ability to do perfectly well on the hot seat, remember her Benghazi testimony. 11 hours of it. The town hall format is something that Trump is more comfortable with. He feeds off of the interaction with the audience. Remember in the first debate, the audience wasn't allowed to interact at all. They blew it a couple times with applause and making noise. But the town hall format is very different. But here's where Trump has to be very, very careful. He's not just going to be fielding questions from the moderators, but from the public, from voters, from real people with real stories, many of whom no doubt spent so much time agonizing over the question they're going to ask. He's got to answer those questions. He's got to connect with the questioners. In other words, he can't default, as he did at times in the forum he did last night, to a 10,000, really a view from that far above the ground. That's not what's going to connect with voters. He's going to have to really answer questions because the audience that's viewing this town hall forum is going to really warm up not just to the candidates, but to the questioners.
I think they could take advice from both of you ladies.
They should.
Both have great advice. When you see, and you talked about Donald Trump, do you think this is going to get him too off message though, Wendy? Do you think he's going to go too far in the other direction?
Yeah, he did a little bit of that verbal wandering, as I call it, last night. When he's asked one question, he kind of segues it into something else. I don't think he's going to get away with it, especially because unlike last night, he's got those two very trained moderators there. They're going to get him back into his lane and force him to answer those questions.
You know what I was wondering about, in fact, the whole thing with Megyn Kelly and the issues that we've had with the moderators, I like that the audience is going to be asking questions because in terms of Trump, not necessarily Hillary as much, but you can't make fun or tease the audience members and the public and the voters if you don't like their question or if you don't like somebody maybe perhaps pushing on you. Laura, what do you think?
I think the dynamics of this race suggest that we are so beyond questioning the moderators. We've now seen several debates, including the vice presidential debate on Monday, where we saw the candidates completely take over. And so that option is always on the table and will certainly be on the table on Sunday night. And so really it's up to the candidates to drive home their message. And I think more than anything, what both candidates need to do is not just to show empathy to the questioner, but let's talk about why they care about the issues that they do. That we don't need to have a wonky policy discussion. What we do need to have is why do you care deeply about children, Hillary Clinton, and women and families? And Donald Trump, why do you so relate to the blue-collar white guy that's out of a job and lost his job at the steel mill? They need to talk about those things because in this sort of gloves-off environment, we haven't seen that. And I think some of that, in addition to answering the tough questions, is going to make a difference more than any moderator.
They're going to have to watch their nonverbals too. Let me just add that. Because this is a very different setting than at the podiums for the first debate. They are going to have to make sure that their nonverbals, the way they move, the way they smile, their facial expressions, the way they react when the other one is talking, that is going to be key, front and center on Sunday night because of the different type of audience than we saw at the last debate.
I'm always fascinated because I like you brought that point up, Laura. the blue collar worker who perhaps is out of a job. And how do the candidates relate to somebody like that, especially Donald, especially maybe how do they relate to that one person? What do they need to tell them specifically to make it say, hey, I'm the guy for you. I'm the one who's going to help you. I may have $1 billion, I may have millions of dollars, but I can help you. How do you do that?
It's a tough question because neither of them can personally relate to that particular worker. So what they've really got to know is they've got to say whatever they can to really assure the audience that they've talked to enough people, that they've spent enough common experience, that they actually understand the issues. That is the problem both of them face. And Laura used the word empathy. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. You can't empathize with somebody if you have absolutely no personal experience walking in their shoes.
Exactly.
So acknowledging that, I think, is the first point they have to make.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think that in addition to that, they need to talk about what they're going to do in a real way. They need to so it's sort of a 1-2 dance. You need to say, hey, I know what your situation is, and be able to articulate it in a way that the person says, you know what, they didn't come from my background, but they get me and they get where I'm at. And then they need to say, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to change things? How and you need to speak to it in a way that they relate to and agree with. And so far, we haven't seen a lot of that from the either side of the campaign. This offers an opportunity for people to do that. And I think let's see. I'm more curious about Donald Trump because his big rallies. Hillary's done a lot of town halls on the stump, and so she's talked to voters more intimately like this. If she can bring some of that experience to the table, she'll do well. I think Donald Trump needs to give it a go. I think he needs to roll the dice, and I think that surprise element will help him.
I think he needs to get his swag back, Raul, in other words, get his mojo on, back in the element.
Well, yeah, and you hope that in this kind of setting, you're speaking to the people, that it's going to be more than just the personality, that the issues will finally come out as opposed to all of the headlines that we hear about real issues. Ladies, one last question before we go. When we talk about moderators, it's what we've been talking about since day one. We've got Anderson Cooper, Martha Raddatz, both of them Trump calls biased. Is this going to be important for this debate, or are we thinking that with the town hall, the more important part is going to be the people asking the questions?
I think the latter, and I think the reason for that is it really detracts a little bit from, whether or not they're biased. These are questions that are going to come from the voting public. I think that's very important. Having said that, everybody is very painfully aware that those two moderators were selected because of their ability to channel the candidates back onto the issues at hand. So whether somebody thinks they're biased or not, the candidates have an opportunity to say what they're going to say regardless of the questions. That's the way they're viewing it, no doubt.
All right, Laura, last word here.
Well, I think Donald Trump is doing that because he is relying entirely upon the momentum of his campaign to get out the vote. He doesn't have the infrastructure in place. It's rallies and the occasional voter registration. Because of that tactical loss, he needs to fire up his base, and calling things out as unfair, whether they are or not, is a technique to doing that. So that's first of all. Second of all, I think that they need to be less concerned about the moderators and really more concerned about their performance. Two things. One, the split screen may be damaging, and they need to have iron control over their nonverbals. And two, you need to be careful when you're walking around the stage because that can be difficult as well. You can look aggressive. You can look too close to your opponent. You can look a little too iron-handed.
Yeah. Laura, Wendy, we thank you both. We'll be texting back and forth and tweeting on Sunday night. We'll spend the weekend together.
Love it.
How about that? It's a deal. All right, guys, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Raul. Thanks, Heather.